Well, fascinating stuff. But I'm going to talk to you about more real-life operations from a company that drives trucks up and down the road every day. And Dr. Taylor mentioned reliability as one of the most important aspects of folks when they determine different options for transportation and costs and taxes and other things. And I got to tell you, we care a little bit about reliability as well, and so do our customers. So infrastructure is really critically important to us. So let me start by answering this question: why do we care? And I'll give you just a bit of an overview. Much of this you may know, some you may not. But every day we wake up and we put about 73,000 vehicles on the road here in the United States, delivering about 15.5 million packages each and every day. Globally, we have about 400,000 employees that work for us. At any given time in our system, we have about 6% of the U.S. GDP or 2% of the world GDP in our vehicles or our airplanes. We drive about 2.9 billion miles in the U.S. every year, and we consume about 530 million gallons of gas, diesel, and alternative fuels. We have what we call an integrated multimodal transportation network. It's the proverbial planes, trains, and automobiles. We drive trucks. We have package delivery vehicles. Any package that travels a distance of, say, 300 miles or more at some point in its journey is on the back of a rail car. We're one of the largest customers of the Class 5 railroads. Many may not know that. And we also have the 9th largest airline that travels around the world. So as you sort of look at that picture, I guess it makes sense why we care about transportation infrastructure and how you fund it and what it costs and how it affects the reliability of our service so that we can meet the expectations of all of our customers around the world. So let's talk a little bit about congestion and maybe some real-life numbers here. And you hear lots of things, particularly the legislators in the room, about the cost of congestion in America. And at the first bullet point, you'll see that according to the Texas Transportation Institute, it's about 4.8 billion hours that are lost. 1.9 billion gallons of gasoline are burned because of congestion, and it costs about $100 billion a year. American Society of Civil Engineers, in a report in 2010, gives this kind of a grade to the infrastructure. But let me tell you from our perspective that for every 5 minutes that our fleet is delayed, it costs us more than $100 million a year in excess costs. So congestion is a very, very big problem for us, and we'll talk about what we think are some of the solutions. But first, let's talk about some of the challenges. And again, I don't know that I'm going to tell you anything you don't know. I just might add some clarification to our feeling about it. But obviously, we have a situation in Washington with just utter gridlock. And the bad news is there's really no end in sight. At the moment, there is a highway bill in the Congress, but I don't know that we'll see anything pass anytime soon. If I had to make a bet today, I would tell you that they would pass another extension, and we would certainly be looking till the end of the fiscal year before we get anything done. There's a problem with solvency of the Highway Trust Fund. In fact, over the last number of years, it has taken money from the general fund to keep the Highway Trust Fund solvent. And we had one of our members of the industry serve on a blue ribbon panel the administration put together several years ago, and to take a look at some of the possible solutions to the transportation infrastructure problem. And their recommendation was that the U.S. invest about $250 billion a year for the next 50 years in order to meet the needs of the highway system for all the infrastructure that needs to be done. At the same time, Congress is now debating a bill that's a 2-year bill for $109 billion. And as you all know, particularly folks involved in state government, traditionally highway bills have been longer term than 2 years and have provided better funding than that. So we're concerned about what's happening in Washington. Lots of different forecasts that you can look at, but most people agree that freight, which is the world in which we work, will double by the year 2025. Passenger vehicle miles have increased 20% from 2008, will increase 20% from 2008 to 2018. And some numbers that Ed Rendell, former governor of Pennsylvania, used just yesterday. He said that from 1980 to 2006, cars traveled 97% more miles, trucks traveled 106% more miles, and road lanes increased 4%. So we've got a problem in what we're doing. Diversion at the state level is a problem. As you see, only about half the states constitutionally protect their money, and we've seen diversion across the country, money from the highway fund somewhere else. And then something that we are, because we're the user of the national system as opposed to a local or a state system, is taking a look at a more holistic approach, not just cars, not just trains, but freight included in the solutions, and at the same time understanding that many of the congested areas around the country aren't so neat that they stop at state boundaries or city boundaries, that they often move from region to region and spill over from state to state. So the solutions need to be bigger than local solutions. So we have, within the industry, have really tried to focus on 8 or 10 or 12 bottlenecks around the country that are really problematic for the users of the highway from the truck perspective. And finally, we always have a saying that, freight doesn't vote. And so from a purely political viewpoint, trucks don't vote, but the people that drive cars do. And so sometimes we see the solutions vary somewhat by that. Now, we had some terrific information this morning from Dr. Taylor, and I didn't disagree with anything you said. I think we all agree that we need more money in the highway system, in the infrastructure, and for the first time in a very long time, the trucking industry now says yes, we need to raise our fuel taxes. And we have been on record for years and years and years saying no. We've had the same federal fuel tax since 1993. And forget the increased amount of travel and freight on the highways today. Just the cost of inflation over that period of time has eaten up any ability to do anything with the system. Tolls, very popular idea in the States today. The trucking industry has long opposed tolls. And the main reason is the cost. I think Dr. Taylor addressed it earlier. The fuel tax system is by far the cheapest and most efficient way to collect a user fee or a tax for use of the highway system. It is less than 1% for every dollar of revenue. And tolls, different studies give us different numbers, but it's somewhere in excess of 20%. So you can collect $1 of fuel tax and spend less than a penny, or you can collect $1 a toll and spend 20 or 25 cents collecting that revenue. And so we continue to favor an increase in the fuel tax both at the state level and the federal level, and in addition, we have been on the side of proposing to index it so that it will keep up with inflation and the cost of things into the future. Alternative funding mechanisms, vehicle miles traveled. We're getting a lot of talk around the country about that, but it's not widely accepted. It has a couple of problems. Number one, the cost, similar to the tolls versus fuel tax issue. Most people think it's probably about a 20% overhead for that sort of a system. And as I think one of the speakers said earlier, that in addition to that, there are real privacy concerns having to do with the VMT. And so we have not been supportive of that, but are willing to listen. We understand that for a variety of reasons, the fuel tax system isn't as efficient or as good as it used to be based upon the efficiency of the vehicles, including trucks, which have gotten more efficient, as well as alternative fuels that people are using today. And so there needs to be some change in the funding mechanism, but at this point in time, there doesn't seem to be a consensus as to what that would be. We do like the notion of focusing on freight, a national strategy versus a more local strategy. And so we have been in lots of talks with both our company and the industry to try and bring freight into the planning process. And I know there are many folks that have a goal of reducing vehicle miles traveled, but in our business, we already believe we operate at a pretty high level of efficiency, and to decrease our vehicle miles traveled means we're doing less business. And we have a pretty anemic growth in the country today anyway, and so for us, that's not a positive. And I understand that passenger cars are a little different story, but we see growth requiring more vehicle miles traveled in the freight industry. And as most of you know, the vast majority of everything that you buy in the store, at some point, somewhere between 70 and 80% of everything that you buy in a store today came on a truck. And so the notion that you could take trucks out of the picture just isn't viable today. And with all due respect to our rail partners there, it's pretty hard to drive a rail car up to the 7-Eleven and make a delivery of candy bars or whatever they're buying there. So now let me kind of sidestep a little bit here and talk about something that you are probably not familiar with that we're involved in, and that has to do with alternative fuel vehicles. And there's a tie to this into the infrastructure conversation. And we have had what we call our rolling laboratory that we have been using for many, many years. And we have been ready, willing, and in most cases able to try and promote new technologies. We have a fleet of vehicles that makes it very easy for us to insert new technologies into our fleet, and we're able to collect data and cost information. And so we've been very, very active. At this stage of the game, we have about 2,500 alternatively fueled vehicles in our fleet, which, by the way, is the highest number of vehicles in any private fleet in the country. And I'll walk you through what those look like. But I have to tell you that as anxious as we are to be part of the solution, there is a cost versus benefit equation that you can't avoid. And so, for example, some of our vehicles cost as much as twice as much to use alternative fuel because the technology just doesn't exist and the manufacturers aren't building these things in enough quantities to drive the cost down. So new technology costs more, and so it's very, very expensive for companies like ours and others to enter this arena and try to be part of the solution. And so in states where we have the ability to get some help in the form of a tax credit to offset those costs, we've been very active. And California, by the way, is one of them. And we've done quite a bit here, and we continue to do more and more. But But there's a problem in the United States with infrastructure for alternative fuels. You can't fuel a CNG vehicle everywhere. You can't fuel an LNG Class 8 tractor trailer everywhere. We are experimenting with hydrogen vehicles. That's pretty hard to find at the Shell gas station. And so there's some infrastructure problems that we have to deal with. And like everything else we talked about today, they cost money. And so we have to figure out a plan to make that happen. But let me show you a couple interesting slides here. We started pretty early on this alternative fuel vehicle stuff. We started in 1935 in New York City with an all-electric vehicle. It only went about 2 miles, and it was very heavy. By the way, we still have one of these that we house and bring around to different places. But we've had the notion for a very long period of time, before there were mandates to do it, before it was cool to be green. We were trying to figure out a way to create a business model where it made sense to do something than use oil. Now here's what our fleet looks like. And we have a whole host of technologies here. These are the ones that are working out in the field today. We have as many as this or more that are still under experimentation that we haven't been able to roll out. But we've got hybrid electric vehicles, with the vast majority of those in the U.S. We have electric vehicles, believe it or not, most of them in Europe. However, stay tuned. That could change soon. Can't announce anything here today, but that might change. We have some propane vehicles. The vast majority of those are in Canada and may be coming to the U.S. Biomethane, 10 of our tractors, which are the tractor trailers you drive with the big trucks. CNG has been our biggest area of alternative fuels. We've been using those vehicles for 25 years, and we continue to use those. The latest for us, and one of the gaps in alternative fuel vehicles, has been large trucks. CNG won't work for a large truck, but it will for a delivery vehicle. So we have, in the last couple of years, found an LNG engine that will work for us. And in the first place we put those tractors, and the vast majority of these 93 tractors are based in Ontario, California, and drive back and forth every day to Las Vegas. And we have some infrastructure, some refueling that we can do along the way. As you might guess, it's very specialized fueling. It requires a great deal of training, but mostly it costs a lot of money. And so they continue to improve that technology, but I will tell you that LNG technology doubles the price of the vehicle. The average tractor, for those you see driving up and down the roads, about $100,000. Any of those tractors for anybody's driving. Some of the more fancy ones the owner-operators do, they get a little bit more expensive with the big sleepers. But these tractors are double that. So at some fashion, while the fuel's a bit cheaper, the payout just doesn't exist. And then when you add the infrastructure cost to that, you're not even in the ballpark unless you have some help. And so let me show you what this looks like, and you may or may not see a difference, but this is one of our LNG tractors being fueled. And I believe that's in Ontario. It's a fascinating technology, and it's working quite well. So, we do care. We care about the roads. We care about airspace. We care about next generation air traffic control, which again, very, very expensive. And we make our living on the road every day, and our customers expect us to have reliability and speed, and we're running into a problem around the country. There's lots of places where traffic is not an issue. Unfortunately, urban areas and areas that you might guess are an issue. The problems are easy, the challenges are tough. And so we haven't seen a lot of consensus over the last few years, but I think we all agree that needs to change, and I don't know what will be the driver of that, but into the future, we certainly hope it will. So, and we like to think that a new perspective and a little more holistic approach to the highway system would be helpful. And to have some sort of a freight component in the planning process is always helpful. And we feel the pain of the states. It's almost impossible for a state highway department to make a 10-year transportation plan when they've only got 90 days worth of federal funding that they can count on. And that's just undoable. And so, you know, we plan our business out 5, 10, 15 years. And in order for us to do that, we have to have the states cooperate if the federal government will help them. And so we really, and we want to be part of the solution. And so we recommend a little bit different view about how we approach different projects around the country and crossing those regional and state boundaries in order to get things done. So anyway, I wanted to share that with you. I hope that provides you a little bit of information about why we care about infrastructure, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.